Okay, just imagine this. A spiritual system that's been set in stone for centuries, and then all of a sudden it starts to crack wide open. We're talking about a 1,000-year period, from the 8th all the way to the 18th century, where India went through this profound revolution of faith. It was a great unchaining of belief that completely reshaped what it meant for people to connect with the divine.
So that's the big question, right? How does something like that even happen? I mean, what kind of forces could possibly crack open a religious system that's thousands of years old? How do you transform it from this rigid, exclusive structure into something deeply meaningful for everybody? You know, from the highest scholar to the everyday farmer. All right, so to really get a handle on this revolution, we first need to rewind a bit and look at what was there before. We're talking about the world of Vedic Brahmanism. This was the old order, and believe me, it was a system that was about to face some immense pressure, from the outside and from within.
So, here was the big problem with that old order. It was incredibly exclusive. You had the sacred texts, the Vedas, but they were written in this super complex form of Sanskrit that, let's be honest, only a tiny elite could ever hope to understand. And get this, women and the lower castes, the Shudras, were flat out forbidden from even reading them. If you wanted to connect with the divine, you had to go through priests and these elaborate, expensive rituals. The result? Millions of people were left feeling completely disconnected.
So, with these other faiths like Buddhism and Jainism gaining ground and challenging the status quo, the guardians of Brahmanism found themselves at a crossroads. They basically had a choice: adapt or fade into irrelevance. Well, they chose to adapt, and their response? It was nothing short of brilliant.
So what did they do? They came up with a whole new set of scriptures, the Puranas. And this was the genius part. They weren't written in that old, complicated Vedic Sanskrit. Nope. They were in a simple, accessible version. And they were packed with these amazing, engaging stories about gods and goddesses. And the most crucial part? Anyone could read them or listen to them. It was a really smart, strategic pivot to bring people back into the fold.
And their method was just brilliant. See, they didn't just write new books. They started absorbing local traditions right into the mainstream. A perfect example is the story of Jagannath in Odisha. He started out as a local tribal deity, worshipped as this simple wooden idol. Then, Brahmanical scholars came along and said, hey, you know who that is? That's a form of the major god Vishnu. And boom, just like that, a local belief gets woven into the grand tradition. Suddenly, everyone feels like they're part of one big spiritual family.
But here's the thing, while all of that was happening, this sort of top-down adjustment, something way more radical was bubbling up from the bottom. This wasn't just an adaptation. This was a full-blown grassroots revolution of the heart. We're talking about the Bhakti movement.
And the core idea of Bhakti was, well, it was breathtakingly simple. It basically said, you don't need a middleman to get to God. You don't need a priest, you don't need a complex ritual. All you need is love. It was all about forging this deep, personal, emotional bond with a deity that you choose. Suddenly, the priest and the sacrificial fire, they just weren't necessary anymore. I mean, think about how revolutionary this was on every single level. First, it completely rejected the authority of the priests. Second, it threw a major challenge at the caste system, basically saying everyone is equal in the eyes of God. And third, instead of that complex Sanskrit, it sang their songs in the everyday languages of the people. This made faith immediate, accessible, and just deeply personal. And you know where this fire started? Not in the big traditional centers of power. No, it ignited way down in 8th century South India with these amazing wandering poet saints. You had the Alvars, who were just passionately devoted to the god Vishnu, and you had the Nayanars, who sang their hearts out for Shiva. They would just travel from village to village, spreading this whole new message of love and devotion through their music.
Okay, so while this massive internal revolution is unfolding, a whole new faith arrives on the scene: Islam. And what's fascinating is that, just like what was happening within Hinduism, it wasn't the rigid, formal version of the religion that connected most deeply with people. It was its mystical, devotional heart, a stream we call Sufism.
So what exactly is Sufism? Well, at its core, it's an inward journey. Sufis believe the ultimate goal is to kind of dissolve your own ego and achieve this direct, personal union with God, who they often call the Beloved. And you don't get there through strict rules and dogma. No, you get there through intense love, through music, and with the help of a spiritual guide, known as a peer.
And this is where it gets really amazing. When you look at the parallels between these two movements, it's just astonishing.
I mean, both Bhakti and Sufism were aiming for the exact same goal, a direct union with the divine. Both of them chose personal love over dry, empty ritual. Both relied on a spiritual guide, the guru for Bhakti, the pir for Sufism. And both used music, bhajans on one side, qawwali on the other, as this powerful way to express their spirituality.
So you've got to ask, what happens when all these powerful currents, this reformed Brahmanism, the Bhakti revolution coming up from the south, and the mystical Sufism coming in from the west, what happens when they all meet and mix in North India? Well, you get an incredible, explosive fusion of spiritual creativity.
So, up in the north, the Bhakti movement kind of branched into two main paths. On one hand, you had what's called Saguna Bhakti. This means devotion to God with a form. A great example is the Saint Mirabai, who worshipped the god Krishna as her divine lover. But then, on the other hand, you had Nirguna Bhakti. And this was devotion to a god without any form, a universal spirit that's beyond all names and physical descriptions.
And maybe the ultimate voice of this Nirguna path was a poet saint named Kabir. He was just a master at this. He would pull words from both Islamic and Hindu traditions, using names like Allah and Pir, right alongside Atman and Nirakar, all to point towards a single, formless reality. You see, for Kabir, all the different religions were just different words trying to describe the same inexpressible truth.
And following right in that Nirguna tradition was another incredible figure, Guru Nanak. He also taught that there is only one formless God, and he passionately rejected all the divisions of caste and religion. And his powerful teachings on equality and direct devotion, well, they would go on to lay the foundation for an entirely new faith, Sikhism.
So when you step back and look at it all, what's the lasting legacy of this 1,000-year transformation? Well, it's huge. It's a permanent shift in focus, away from external rituals and towards a personal, internal experience. It's the empowerment of voices that had been silenced for centuries, women in lower castes who are now celebrated as saints. And of course, it's this breathtaking heritage of devotional poetry and music that still inspires millions today.
And that really leaves us with a final question, something to think about. In a world that's still struggling with so much inequality and division, what can we learn today from these powerful historical movements? Movements that championed a direct personal connection to the divine, one that was open to absolutely everyone, no matter who they were or where they came from.